And what do? We lower ourselves to the standards of that person. James tells us that we need to be slow to speak and we need to be a lot quicker to hear. So when you do that, you control your spirit, you control your anger, you control your disposition. Now, one of the first things that I want to share with you today is the following. How do you relate, listen to me carefully, to constructive criticism in your life? Do you get uptight or do you get defensive? How do you relate to criticism in your life? I would rephrase that. Whether that criticism is constructive, whether it's directed at you in order to make you a better person or in order to hurt you, how do you respond to criticism? Do you get uptight or do you get defensive? I would say to you the following. Don't consider the source when you're being criticized. Consider the suggestion. In other words, don't look at the person and who the person may be. Listen to what the person is saying. Because many times we are out of fellowship or out of a relationship with someone, and we know that there is someone that's jealous of us. We know that there is someone that doesn't like us and that they're constantly saying things in order to humiliate us. But you know what? You need to put that aside. Don't look at the source. Look at what that person is saying. In fact, we should be concerned about leaders and about pastors and believers that have all the answers. I think that people like that are more dangerous to the church than helpful. You don't have all the answers. You don't know everything. The moment that you think that you know everything, the moment that you think that you have all the answers is the moment that you start to grow. I want you to understand one thing. The truth is that your biggest critics often are the people that help you the most. They do that unintentionally, but they are often the ones that help you the most. They mean to hurt you sometimes, but God can use that criticism, and it's important that you understand this. God can use that criticism that's being projected towards you in order to teach you and make you the kind of person that He wants you to be. Now that may sound strange, but you know what? God can do that. Does that mean that we should blindly accept everything negative that's being said about us? That's not what I'm saying. Of course not. Sometimes people are just mean and they are cruel and they are filled with jealousy and they want to hurt you. So they'll say things that they know that you're going to hear, maybe through a friend or maybe through a group of people. They know that these things are going to affect you. But you know what? Next time that you are criticized, ask God, God, is there something that I can learn from what's being said about me? Because you know, sometimes we don't want to hear what a person is saying simply because we don't get along with that person, or we don't like that person, or we are not friends with that person, we're not in fellowship with that person. But you need to understand that sometimes in the criticism that's being said about you, maybe there is a certain element of truth. Maybe you are this type of person and you don't realize it. And it's important that we understand and ask God, God, is there something that I can learn by what's being said about me? Now, one of the things that I want to do today, before we go any further, is that I would like you to go to the gospel, or rather to the book of Genesis. And I want you to look with me at chapter 50 in the book of Genesis, because we're going to be speaking for a moment about the life of Joseph. And we're going to be looking at how Joseph handled criticism and malice in his life. I want you to look at Genesis chapter 50, but before we do that, I want to share with you a little bit of background on the life of Joseph. Understand that the Bible teaches us that Joseph was one of the 12 brothers, 12 sons that Jacob had, and he was the youngest of all the brothers. Now, because he was the youngest, and because Jacob had him at a very late stage in his life, he made the mistake that many parents do when they have their last child at the last stage of their lives. and that's that they pamper them. They show favoritism to them as opposed as to the other ones. The favoritism that Jacob showed towards Joseph made his brothers extremely resentful and hateful and angry towards Joseph. They were angry because everything that Jacob did, basically he did in order to exalt Joseph and put him in first place. Now we understand that in the Old Testament, the Bible teaches us that the firstborn, the oldest, was the one that had the right of leading the rest of the brothers. The Bible even tells us that God made, or rather that Jacob made Joseph a coat of many colors. By doing that, he showed his favoritism towards Joseph, and he increased the animosity, the hate and the anger and the jealousy that his brothers had towards him. Now, Jacob didn't mean to do this, but in his ignorance, he actually fueled the flames. The Bible says that the brothers of Joseph were so angry, they were so upset, they were filled with so much hate, that one day they decided that when they went out to the fields, they would address this matter and they would bring this situation to an end. So the Bible says that they decided to kill him, and they threw him in a stern, and they were going to leave him there for dead. It also says that they took the coat of many colors that Jacob had made for him. They drenched it in the blood of animals. They created a story, and they said, you know what, we'll go back, we'll tell the old man that a wild beast devoured him, and this is all that we were able to bring back. As they were walking away, and Joseph was in that stern, the Bible says that one of his brothers was moved to, I don't know if you can call it compassion, but he came up with another diabolical idea. He says, rather than have the blood of Joseph on our lives, why don't we take Joseph, sell him to the Ishmaelites, and by the same token, make some money for ourselves? So they sold Joseph into slavery. The Bible says that when they sold him into slavery, they took him, the Ishmaelites, to Egypt, and they sold him to the Egyptians. And there the Bible tells us in the book of Genesis that Joseph was incarcerated for a long period of time. Now, can you imagine how this young man suffered and the way that he must have felt? Because of the criticism, because of the persecution, because of the jealousies that his brothers had towards him, and everything that he had to go through. All the time that he spent in jail until God, in his mercy, released him from jail. You know something? People will try to incarcerate you with their jealousy. People will try to incarcerate you with their criticism. But you gotta understand that if you are a child of God, and if you are in the will of God, no matter what they do to you, no matter where they place you, God is going to be in the midst of that situation. I know that that brought relief to the mind and the heart of Joseph. I know that Joseph knew in the profoundness of his heart that someday God would liberate him from that situation. And surely enough, the Bible tells us that they not only released him from jail, but he became the right-hand man of Potiphar, the king of Egypt. He administered all the food. He administered all the economy that belonged to the land of Egypt. And it also tells us that during that time, and during that situation, back in the land where Joseph's brothers lived, a famine took over the whole land. A famine came to the extent where there was no food, there was no water, and each and every one of them were at the verge of being extinct because of the famine.